Before you received that interview invitation email, before you revised your resume, spent 3 days grinding interview questions, and asked friends about this company's salary range. Before you put on that one shirt that wasn't too wrinkled and adjusted your lighting 3 times. In front of the camera, there was already a number, a metric, a funnel conversion target. The hiring system had already decided how many interviews needed to be completed this week. Then the interviewer worked backward, finding just enough people to make up that number. That Tuesday afternoon, Emily's phone buzzed. A recruiter from a tech company sent her a message saying they had seen her resume and felt she was a good fit for an operations role, asking if she was interested in chatting. She was at her desk revising a weekly report, and her heart skipped a beat. She had been at this small startup for 2 years, had been wanting to switch jobs for 4 months, and had submitted over 30 resumes, most of which disappeared without a trace. This message felt like a flicker of light in a tunnel that had been dark for too long. She replied immediately, "Yes, thank you." The recruiter scheduled a video interview for Friday at 2 p.m. The interviewer would be the head of operations. She took half a day off. She spent 2 evenings researching the company's business lines, funding status, and competitors. She prepared 3 versions of the answer to "Why do you want to join our company?" She even looked up the interviewer's LinkedIn. Graduated in marketing from a state university. Worked at Google and Meta for 3 years each, and joined this company last year as a director. She thought about how to talk about the conversion rate from her previous job in a way that was both honest and not mediocre. She wrote a full page of notes. She felt like she had a real chance. Because the recruiter had said one sentence, "Your background seems quite suitable," what she didn't know was that this phrase, "quite suitable," was a standard template. It was separated from her resume by just 3 seconds of scanning. That week, the recruiter's KPI was screen 60 resumes into the initial round, send out 20 interview invitations, and complete 15 valid interviews. By Tuesday afternoon, only 11 invitations had been sent and 9 interviews completed. They were still 6 short of the target. Friday was the deadline. Emily was one of those 6. The interviewer, the head of operations, also had his own KPI. One of his metrics was called recruitment participation, which meant his department had to complete a certain number of interviews within a set time frame. Otherwise, it would affect his HR collaboration score. That score was tied to his quarterly bonus. He didn't actually need to hire anyone. The position under him had already been mentally reserved for a former colleague he planned to bring in, but that person's resignation process wasn't finished yet. It would take at least 3 more weeks. The company's hiring system didn't care about that. The system only showed, "This position has been open for 45 days, and the department head must complete at least 8 interviews this month." By Friday morning, he had only done 5. Emily was the 6th. The interview started on time. Emily wore light makeup, and her background was a borrowed white wall. She had cleared her bookshelf because she thought it looked too messy. She smiled at the camera. The interviewer appeared on screen with a virtual office background. He introduced himself and said, "Why don't you briefly introduce yourself?" Emily spoke for about 3 minutes, well-paced, not reciting her resume, and highlighting a project that was highly relevant to their business. The interviewer nodded and started asking questions. First question, what data analysis tools do you usually use? Second, what's the highest ROI you've achieved in a campaign? Third, why are you leaving your current job? Emily answered each question carefully. She noticed the interviewer's eyes drifting occasionally to the bottom right corner of the screen. That was the clock. When she got to the third question, the interviewer glanced down at something. Emily guessed he was looking at her resume. He flipped through it for 2 seconds, looked up, and asked a fourth question. What is your expected salary? She gave a number, 30% higher than her current salary, leaving room for negotiation. The interviewer made no comment. Then he said, "All right, I think I have a general understanding. HR will follow up with you." The entire interview lasted 17 minutes. None of the questions she had prepared over tonight's were asked. She didn't even get a chance to ask her own questions about the team structure, about the core challenges of the role. After the interview, Emily felt something was off. She couldn't quite put her finger on it. She reassured herself, maybe this interviewer is just efficient and concise. She waited a week. No response. She waited another week. Then she proactively messaged the recruiter, politely asking about the result. 2 days later, the recruiter replied, "Sorry, this role has been adjusted for now. We'll reach out if there are suitable opportunities in the future." A template. Later, she heard through another source that the role had gone to an internally referred candidate, decided even before the interviews began. She wasn't alone. In a job-seeking community similar to Reddit's interviews, she saw countless similar stories, being invited to interviews that lasted less than 20 minutes, with shallow, procedural questions, interviewers distracted the whole time, and then no follow-up at all. Some people called it KPI interviews. Some said their interviewer opened another document on screen and typed while asking questions. No one knew whether they were taking notes or replying to messages. Some said the interviewer hadn't even looked at their portfolio, because the questions asked were things clearly written on the resume. Others said the interviewer took a call halfway through, came back, and said, "Sorry, let's stop here for today." When these things happen individually, every candidate doubts themselves. Was I not good enough? Was my background really not a match? Did I say something wrong? They spend a long time replaying the interview, trying to find a mistake they can fix. What they don't know is that often, there was no mistake. Their resume was never truly in the real candidate pool. They were invited simply because, that Thursday afternoon, the system showed weekly interview completion rate, 62%, still a few short of the target. The KPI system for interviewers is an invisible logic that candidates never see. In most medium to large companies, hiring is not simply about finding the best person. It is a pipeline with input volume, flow rate, and conversion metrics. Recruiters and HRBPs are measured on resume screening volume, interview invitations, interview completion rates, pass-through rates, offer acceptance rates, and onboarding rates. Every stage is monitored by numbers. If one part of the funnel becomes too narrow, someone will ask, "Why aren't enough people coming in? Are your standards too strict? Are you not working hard enough?" So, to widen the funnel, interview invitations must be sent out even if it's clear that many of those candidates won't make it to the final round. Interviewers, especially hiring managers, required to meet department interview quotas, receive friendly reminders from recruiters. "We still have a few gaps this week. Can you help schedule some interviews?" They open the candidate database and filter by keywords. Not reading carefully, just scanning. 3 seconds. A resume appears. Decent school, somewhat related experience, similar job title, good, this one. They send an invitation. What they don't say is that the real requirement for the role might be a very specific type of resource, or a background from certain big companies like Amazon or Microsoft, or even simply someone referred by senior leadership. But these conditions cannot be written in the job description, because that could be discriminatory or illegal. So they bring in candidates to fill the numbers, to make the funnel look like it's functioning. That 17-minute interview for Emily, it was 4 months of anxiety, 2 sleepless nights, a leave request, and a carefully prepared white wall background. For the interviewer, it was just a number in his weekly report. Interview count +1, completion rate increased from 60.5% to 71.4%. He closed the video call, clicked "not a fit" in the internal system, and typed 3 words in the remarks, "not a match." He didn't even need to give a reason. The system didn't require one. He still had 2 more interviews that day. The next one was in 15 minutes, a male candidate whose resume mentioned experience at a competitor. But he had already glanced and realized that the candidate's work was actually in a completely different business area. It didn't matter. Emily was labeled "not a match," and that tag would stay in the system. The next time the company hires, her resume might be pulled up again, scanned for 3 seconds again, and she might be invited again for a role she will never actually be considered for, because the system doesn't remember that she has already been screened out once. The system only remembers her fields. This phenomenon is especially severe during peak hiring seasons. In 2023, a survey by the Society for Human Resource Management in the United States showed that about 37% of recruitment professionals admitted that, under pressure to meet interview invitation quotas, they had sent interview invitations to candidates who clearly did not meet job requirements. Among candidates who received no feedback within a week after interviews, More than half later learned that the rejection reasons did not match the actual job requirements. Behind these numbers are stories like Emily's. Some people might say, isn't this just efficiency? Companies need to filter, to build talent pools. Interviews are inherently a two-way selection process. Rejection is normal. That's true. But the problem is this: when an interviewer already knows the role has been filled, or knows the candidate doesn't meet key requirements, yet still brings them in just to go through the process. It is no longer selection, it is performance. A performance for the system, for the metrics, for upper management. Emily eventually found a new job. The interviewer at her new company spoke with her for 40 minutes, asked about the most difficult project she had handled, what she would do differently if given another chance, and how she viewed the next phase of the industry. She got the offer. But that was after she had gone through 7 similar KPI interviews. Each time, she doubted herself. Each time, she thought she wasn't good enough. Until a friend of hers who worked as a recruiter told her privately, "Don't take it too seriously. Some interviews are just to fill numbers. You just happen to show up in the system at that moment." The KPI system for interviewers was not designed to select people, it was designed to measure the activity level of the hiring system. There is a huge gap between the two. That gap is filled with candidates' time, hope, and dignity. They take half a day off, lose half a day's wages, spend money on transportation for in-person interviews, practice their self-introduction in front of a mirror, and then are dismissed in a matter of minutes by someone who is already disengaged. They receive no meaningful feedback, not even basic respect, because respect does not generate KPI. Back to that number. Before anyone receives an interview invitation, before anyone revises a resume, researches a company, or prepares questions, there is already a KPI. It is written in some quarterly plan, broken down into months, weeks, and days. The system needs volume, the pipeline needs numbers. Job seekers think this is a two-way evaluation, but often, they are simply being pulled into someone else's performance assessment.